Welcome to the Infinite Life with Katische Haberfield. I'd like to take you on a transformative journey, exploring the mysteries of the soul. I hope you enjoy the regression case studies, mediumship interviews, and fascinating discussions that I've had with guests on the podcast. I hope that these answer some of the questions that you might have about life on this planet, on others, and in other dimensions. Thank you for joining me, and please don't forget to like and subscribe. And, most importantly, share with your friends. Namaste.
Hi, this is Katische, and here's another one of my poems, and it's called The Soft Wind Blows. I hope you enjoy it. The soft wind blows and bellows through the corners of my mind. Sometimes it makes me feel anxious, like a pressure that needs to be released, and a heat behind my neck. But when I center myself and notice the prickles on my skin, I realize that last night I promised myself to remember, that it was a sign of remembering, that my intention is for self-care when I reflect on nature, so that my body can relax the pains it accumulates inside as my emotions subside, as rose petals fall from the skies in my mind and anxieties get swept away with the wind. Thank you. Namaste. Here's another poem that I wrote to help you navigate your emotions. This one's once again about fear, because fear has been the predominant emotion in my life that I have needed to understand and transmute like an alchemist would. And here it is, so I hope you enjoy it, and don't forget to reach out if you need help with your emotions through the many ways that I can help you with hypnotherapy, past life regression therapy, mediumship, and other ways that we can look at where your body stores emotions. Thank you. Fear the one-way street. Fear feels like a one-way street until you're halfway down it. And then you can see an escape hatch beneath your feet. The question is, are you strong enough to open it? For what is down there in the dark? Could it be worse than what's up here? What if you go down there and completely disappear? But the truly brave understand that what goes down must come up. And when you are ready to face that battle, the job will seem quite hard, but you were given a parachute, if only you'd open your mind. For inside your mind, there is a light, if you'd only just turn it on. That was written on the 9th of December, 2024. This one comes from the vault. I can't remember when I wrote it, but I think it was after my divorce. So circa 2011, 2012. Well, separation anyway. And so I was trying to write a manuscript. And also I had been writing a blog for a couple of years, which was actually called Facing Fear, about the journey of being a single mother with 2 small children. And I hope to share some of the poetry that I wrote about my father's death in my next episode, because it was the culmination of quite a journey, which you can actually go back to episode 1, the very first episode in my podcast, starts a few months before my father's death, but also at the same time as my separation and ultimately divorce. So this podcast has been both a journey professionally and emotionally, and as a way to record it and help others. So here's the poem, which is called The Computer Taunts Me. Or perhaps it's called Go and Prove It. I'm yet to decide the name of it. By the time I end up reading it, I'm sure I'll have it chosen. Go on, prove it. The computer taunts me. So, you want to be a writer? Where's the writing then? You're full of shit. Always loud-mouthing what you want to do, but never actually having the discipline to see it through. Always allowing fear to quash your dreams, as if it were a parent disgustedly stubbing out a cigarette confiscated from a teenager. Thank you. So what I remember particularly about writing this poem is I've never smoked in my life. And it's funny how our mind will bring thoughts out when we're trying to get a breakthrough. And what I've learned is that if you can't do something that you want to do, there's probably another way of expressing it. And for me, for many years, it was through photography. But interspersed with that, I used to create motivational pictures by simply taking a photo, and then back in 2011, the technology was not so wonderful, there wasn't Canva around, and I would put a poem on the top of it, or some prose from books that I'd read, or some other people. And one of the people that I actually did interact with a lot during my hard days was actually a hypnotherapist, and his name is Joseph Clough. And I used to send him some of my little images, which he used to use on Instagram way back in the day. And they're quite terrible when you look at them back now, but they provided me inspiration. And I guess that perhaps you could say that Joseph Clough is one of the reasons why I am now a clinical hypnotherapist, because I listened to a lot of his stuff in the early days. And I think it's important to be able to look back at old notes and see how far you've gone. I'm not a journal writer, but I have written a couple of books in my lifetime that never got published that were really instrumental in me processing my thoughts and emotions. And I did write a book which was called The Rambling Thoughts of the Lake House Writer, or something like that, which was navigating my emotions as a single mother, trying to understand how to be a blogger back in the days when blogging was relatively new. I used to have it on a PDF, but I think that eventually I deleted it, and it was kind of cathartic to do that. And after I wrote that, I wrote, I think it's 70,000 words about the death of my father, and I took that to an agent. And she said to me, I think that the story that you should write is about how photography inspired you. And I never wrote that next book. And I printed out a copy of that, and I left it in a box in my cupboard. And recently I reopened it and looked at it, and I realized it was totally different from the book that I remember writing. Because here's an interesting story for you, and bless your soul to the person who I'm about to tell this story about. Now I understand his comments, and maybe the version that I have in that box upstairs is different to the one that I handed him, but I was being very brave at that time about dating. So my ex-husband worked away in the country, so he used to be away for 3 weeks at a time. And when he would come back, he would have the children. And then it moved to, every 2 weeks he would come back home to his house. And I had waited 3 years before dating. I think that's right. And so I found somebody online that I decided to try dating. And this person was a spiritual person. They were very interested and they taught a lot about emotions themselves. So it was a good sounding board to have somebody who was like yourself, that you could hash out ideas and they could basically call out your crap. And I remember getting to that point where I thought, I really trust this person. And I've got this manuscript ready about death and my father's death. And I don't know whether I emailed or I posted it. No, I posted it to him. And I remember not hearing from him. And his comment to me, and now we do know that our memory can sort of give us a one-side perspective, and that's where hypnotherapy helps, because you can go back in time, see what actually happened, get perspective, and you can release the sadness and get your higher self's perspective, reclaim that moment, so to speak. So instead of disempowering you, it empowers you. And I remember getting a message from him, and it said, I said, hey, what do you think of the manuscript? And he said something like, I hated it. And I was crestfallen. And I said, why? And he said, because you gave me no hope. I said, what do you mean? My father died of cancer. He had, 8 months to live. He was diagnosed and died within 8 months. There was never any hope that he was going to live. And he said, I don't know if I can be with somebody like that. And that was the end of that relationship. But it made me angry and it made me sad. And what I did do is I then went and enrolled in a writing course. I can't remember the time span in between. That was at the Queensland State Library, run by the organising body that does all the writing stuff in Queensland. I can't remember what it's called. Queensland Writers Society or something like that. And I met a fabulous teacher. And I did a writing course for non-fiction. And I remember him encouraging me to write. And the interesting thing was I named the title of the manuscript Perfect Grief. And I think that's one of the things that we do when we write, is that we try to perfect things. And in the world of publishing, we do need perfect writing, so to speak. That's why they use editors. And sometimes the book's not right. And when I looked back over the manuscript, I realised when I changed it again, how much of my journey, I guess part 2 of the ramblings of the Lake House Writer, ended up being in that book. And I thought, geez, I'm glad that book never got published, because I would delete 50% of it, because 50% of it was my single mother story and my dating stories, and then the rest is my dad's story. But then I was like, well, how do you disentangle the fact that my father was dying at the same time that I was going through a separation and a divorce? It's all one jumble in my mind. You can't really, can you? You can't separate things and keep them in neat piles. So anyway, at the same time, I've been writing a ghost book about my collected experiences with learning how to be a medium and crossover ghost, and I've got that to 80,000 words. And again, I've tangled it all up. I'm not happy with it. I'm trying to be perfect again. So I guess what I'm finding is some respite through my poetry and writing poems when it inspires me, and also being able to publish them. So again, a plug for Katie Carey and Soulful Valley Poems, because soon we will be publishing Soulful Poems 4. And these poems, well, some of them over the last few episodes will be featured in that book. And maybe even Soulful Poems 5. I'm not quite sure how many poems. I've got 5, but I'm not sure it's 5 or 8 in Soulful Poems 4. So anyway, if you'd like to learn more about being a poet or being a writer, this is not sponsored, but I do get an affiliate payment if you look at or complete the drop form on Katie Carey's Pen site page, which if you go to the podcast player app that you are looking at, you will see in the notes a link to do you want to be a writer, or so you want to be a poet, or something like that. Click on that, it'll take you to a drop form, fill out your details and apply to be a poet or even do your own book. And if you're successful, then Katie Carey gives me a commission affiliate payment, which helps me publish more poems and keep this podcast alive. So I think that's all I'll do for today's episode, because I think I have discovered a few emotions and I need to go and have some porridge for breakfast now. It's Brisbane and it's winter on the 19th of June. And I would like to keep my dad's poems because they're quite raw, moving emotions about cancer. And I'll do that on another episode. So namaste. Thank you so much. Always love to hear from you. Podcasting is a solo journey, but I would like to reach out and say thank you to all the people in Finland who helped The Infinite Life with Katische podcast reach number 19 in spirituality on Apple Podcasts this week. Woohoo! Take care. Until then, namaste.